welcome to Dissident Daughters podcast. I almost forgot the name of my podcast.
We're off to a good start.
Yes, off to a great start. It's been a couple weeks since I recorded, and today I have a special guest. So this person with me here, she's going to go by Rhoda.
Yes.
Because that's her temple name, and she wants to be just like me.
Just want to be like you.
So we just have gotten to know each other over the last month or so. She reached out to me, and when I asked for people who wanted to be interviewed and tell their story, she reached out to me, and I'm so glad you did. And we just got back from a fabulous lunch. And
a 2-hour lunch.
A 2-hour lunch. So just buckle up because, we might talk a lot. We can talk for a long time, apparently.
We are drunk on soda.
It doesn't take alcohol to get us chatty, right? Oh, goodness. So she has a really fascinating story, you guys. I am really excited for you guys to hear her story. And I bet it's not that unique. And the reason why I say that is because when she told me kind of a little bit about her story, I just resonated with so much of it. And I've experienced a lot of the same things. And I think we're not alone. I think there's so many people. So I'm going to let her kind of start from wherever she wants to start and tell her story. Go ahead.
All right. I'll take it away. So I'm going to go by Rhoda, which was my temple name because I did go through the temple many years ago. And honestly, I reached out because my husband actually was telling me I should, honestly. I don't know if I would have otherwise.
Yeah.
But he, obviously knows my story and knows what's happened over the past couple of years. And he encouraged me to reach out, so I did. And what I kind of decided on this was, it's a hard story to tell in some ways because it is about the LGBTQ plus community. Mm-hmm. But it's a kind of a story that not a lot of people can talk about because there's a lot of people coming out maybe about their own stories of coming out, or if parents have sons or daughters,
children,
that are coming out into the queer community. You hear more stories of those, but my story, it really hasn't been told, and it's complicated because it involves other people, and that's kind of why I decided to reach out, because it's actually not a ton about me. It's more about when my dad came out. So my dad came out about 2 years ago. And so this really is going to be a lot about how this has affected my life, affected my family's life. Yeah. My parents have been lifelong members, and it's something that he kept very close and hidden for decades, 50 plus years. So I wanted to kind of shine a light on how the Mormon church and its teachings they have done so much damage to the queer community, and they continue to do that. Yes. And so I wanted to kind of talk about that.
And it has a ripple effect into the families.
It does.
Because what they were taught to do affected their entire lives, whoever they decided to marry, and as they stayed in the closet that whole time. So yes, that's really at the root of it all, right? Is just how much there is a ripple effect. It's not just that one person who's queer that it affected, and it's terrible for them because they've had to stay in the closet their whole lives, all this stuff, but there is an absolute terrible ripple effect.
And it's something that, honestly, I think I will probably be dealing with for the rest of my life. It'll affect my family for the rest of our life. I mean, it's a generational thing. It's something that, in the end, has made both my mom and my dad collateral damage to a church that is not friendly to anybody who could be gay or bisexual or transgender or any of those things. And they are left to make really, really hard choices about what they do with their lives. And some people, and I think nowadays, people are becoming more okay with coming out and telling their stories. But you have to realize too that for my dad, who grew up he was born in the 50s.
Yeah.
Not only was it like a church issue, but it was a society issue as well.
Yeah.
So this is something that even people outside of the church at the time, I think, were also making choices of getting married to and living a life of being a heterosexual.
Yeah.
And so that's something that I think more people are getting better at, but the church hasn't really changed a whole lot. Like,
right.
They may say they are.
Yeah.
There's some lip service there.
Yeah.
But I think when you really look at what's being said and what's still being said, there's still a lot of issues there.
There's a lot of harm still being done.
Yes.
And because it's been such a long-term thing, this has been going on since, the beginning of the church, but like in the 50s and 60s and 70s, they really started being vocal about the gay issues. And so, for decades, this rhetoric that they've been spouting off about queer people has affected generations of people. And so it's almost like the undoing of that is going to take an insane amount of time.
Well, I don't know if you ever remember, like I remember hearing this like in Young Women's about how like if you take the tube of toothpaste and let's say you get it all out of the toothpaste, right? Let's, what people say, like, and they're trying to like, if you gossip or whatever,
yes, right? And then you can't put it back in.
You can't put it back in. Well, this is the church too. Like they have said all of these things and it's there. It's out there for people to find. It's not that hard to find.
Yeah.
And they're trying to maybe do some damage control, right? But they can never put that all back. And I don't think they really want to.
Yeah, I don't think they do either. I think they're almost like, I especially feel this from Nelson and Oaks, is that they're digging in their heels harder.
Yeah. Yes.
Like, we are not going to change this thing. We are not going to bend to society.
Right.
That, I feel like those two have that problem more than any of them.
But they don't have a problem being like, hey, look, our Mormon Tabernacle Choir sang with the gay San Francisco choir. They don't have a problem with that kind of PR.
Yeah, I actually didn't remember that. But yeah. Yeah, and maybe somehow that makes them think they're being inclusive.
Right.
What the hell? They don't get any credit for that.
No,
I'm sorry.
They don't. No, but, this is something for me. This came out about 2 years ago for me. And it's honestly has been something I haven't been able to talk to. Like I haven't been able to talk to anybody about it because I think the difference for me versus other people is, I really haven't been able to say anything because it's not really my story in a lot of ways. It's not about me coming out. And it's not about like a child coming out. This is a parent.
Yeah. And they have their whole lives, their friends, their colleagues, their coworkers, their jobs they have to worry about, their, whatever. And they have a lot of reasons for why they stayed in the closet.
Right.
And so it's not like it's okay for us to just out them to the world.
Right.
So
no.
it gets really tricky. Yeah.
And that's why I think, like when my husband and I were talking about this, I really wanted to kind of focus more on the effects that it's had since he's come out. Because I'm sorry, it's kind of a mind fuck when your parent comes out. There's a lot of emotions that you go through, and there's a lot of pain. There's a lot of sadness. There's a lot of grief. And I will get all into that.
There's a lot of questioning, like everything in your whole life.
Yeah.
What else did I not know about?
How do you trust somebody when you have... I think that was one of my biggest things when this all first came out. And I would sit there and kind of be like, how do you go back to trusting someone? If someone that you have known your entire life, who was taking care of you, who was responsible for you, who... all of these things... and they've kept such a big part of their lives locked away. How do you learn to trust people?
Yeah, it's still a betrayal. Even though you have compassion for why he kept it a secret, it's still, you were still betrayed. You were still lied to.
It's hard.
Yeah.
So, and especially because for me, and I think a lot of people can understand this, I grew up in a household, my parents we were active members. Like we went to church. Rarely a Sunday we didn't go, like unless we were like sick or on vacation. We were not the family that would go on vacation and go to church.
Thank the Lord for that.
Oh my But, we were pretty much always, and if we didn't go to church, and if they knew we were sick or whatever, like, we had consequences for that, and so they were very active. They held various callings in like their local wards and in their stake levels. But I think part of what I kind of struggled with was my dad was really he was the enforcer. He was the religious enforcer. So, he was the one between my mom and my dad who really put that pressure on. You had to go to church. It was early morning seminary for me. I was not like these kids who get to like do it during school. Yeah. I was up very early for it. And if I didn't go, I didn't get my car that day.
Oh,
so,
yeah.
No seminary, no car. And so, and I was growing, and I lived in Idaho at the time, and so I could actually get my license very early.
Oh.
So I had it the end of my freshman year in high school, and so that was a big thing. Like, I wanted to have my car. We had to, we kept the Sabbath day holy. We really didn't do anything. We'd go to church, and we'd come home for the rest of the day. And a lot of that, and that was a lot from my dad. The expectations were very high pressure, and a lot of those were from my dad. When I went to college and I eventually met my husband, when we got engaged, my dad's first question to him was, well, is this going to be a temple marriage? Like,
Oh, and I should also tell people that you're the oldest. You're the first daughter, right?
I'm
you're the oldest in your family, and I swear that matters because parents are usually the hardest on their first kid of like making sure, because you have to be the example to your younger siblings.
Yes.
You also have to, it's like your parent, it's a reflection of your parents if you make bad decisions, right?
Yes.
And parents in the church very much feel this. So he's putting on the pressure to be perfect, to do all the things correctly, to check all the boxes, right?
Go to Young Women's, go to Mutual. And this was kind of in between of doing everything else. I mean, I worked a part-time job. I played several varsity sports. I did several musical instruments. So on top of your kind of normal teenage stuff, I also had the extra burden of making sure I was keeping up with all the church stuff as well.
Yeah.
We were hit or miss on family home evening and scripture study, but, I served in various presidencies, Beehive presidency. I think I was either the My Maid or the Laurel president, which, that was, you didn't say no to those callings, even though I was super busy.
Yeah. Did you also, like, feel special, like, that you got called to those callings?
Actually, the funny thing, when I got called, I felt like, because I was complaining about the Mutual activities. Oh. And I don't know if someone overheard me. Or maybe it was my dad. I don't know. Maybe he said something. But I, very shortly after that, got called. And I remember my dad being like, well, here's your chance to change it. And I tell you, I did some fun ones.
You did change it.
Yes, because I was the sporty kind of tomboy in a lot of ways. And so I wanted to do the sports. Let's go play kickball outside. Let's go do some other things. So I don't know if I felt special, but I kind of felt called out a little bit.
Yeah. Oh, I felt special. I was the Beehive president.
Ooh.
I thought to myself, I must be the most spiritual girl in the whole
living so righteously
Beehive class. Yes. I was just living right. So, and they had the spirit of discernment because they knew that I was the most spiritual, so they called me. Anyways, I'm such a brat.
No, but it's like, and we were at the time in a small town. So I feel like there was even that extra pressure of, it's not like you could kind of be anonymous.
Yeah, like did everybody know everybody kind of a thing? Or everybody's in everybody's business a little bit?
Not quite, we weren't like as small as that. But the town was about 8,000 people. So it's small enough that you definitely like will run into like all the people at the grocery store. And it wasn't it was Idaho, but it was not a Mormon dominated area. But there was still a fair amount there. I think about between 10 to 15% of my high school was probably LDS.
Okay. Yeah, that's actually not that much. I'm surprised for Idaho. I still thought Idaho was pretty heavily Mormon populated, maybe in certain areas.
Yeah, the farther you get away from the Utah border, I think, and we were not by the Utah border, and so I think the farther you get away from it, it's still there, but it's not
as much.
Not as much.
Yeah.
No. But, I think, and that's where they served in a lot of state callings.
Yeah.
So I think there was definitely kind of that level of showing that, we were the perfect family.
Yeah. Yes, definitely.
And being the oldest, you have that, just the pressure in general of having that. And then being, I think, part of a high demand religion, there was high demand at church and there was high demand at home as well. And so I had a lot of perfection issues and a lot of avoidance issues too. If I didn't think I could do it and excel at it, I didn't try.
Oh, okay.
Because I didn't want to fail.
Right. Yeah.
So if it was something that I didn't think I could do, I just avoided it.
And that like protected you from failure, right?
Yeah. Failure was really not an option.
Yeah.
And honestly, even growing up, I had some issues with church history and church doctrine.
Okay.
But the first one I remember is polygamy.
Yes.
Right? Yes. And I don't even remember how old I was when I learned about it. I was probably middle school or high school.
Okay.
And I remember learning about it. And I just remember feeling like this just doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel right. It doesn't make sense. I don't understand how this is an eternal principle. And reading in the Doctrine and Covenants and reading how like Emma Smith was treated in it. And I didn't really understand it. I didn't really have the words for it at the time, but I was like, I just don't feel like this fits. Like this doesn't fit the rest of the Doctrine and Covenants or whatever. Like why is this something that she's going to be like killed over?
Oh yeah. They came down hard on her.
Did. Yeah. But and then because I think she reluctantly agreed because, her life is threatened, she, in a lot of ways, has like a blemished reputation because she does either people think she was fully on board or they think she was like the downfall of Joseph Smith, basically.
Yeah. Well, and Brigham Young surely believed that.
Yes.
Brigham Young and her did not get along because she was, well, in my opinion, like a strong and powerful woman who spoke up and who was not okay with the bullshit that was going on.
Right.
And so when she spoke up, Brigham Young thought she was a terrible,
she was
not doing her womanly duty.
She was a meek.
Yeah.
So that was my first one. I also was very much, I think because I was more of a tomboy, I didn't like the patriarchy. Patriarchy. Yes, patriarchy. I didn't like it. And I don't feel like it was like super dominant in my home. My mom worked, I think my dad actually did a lot of stuff at home. He did
domestic things.
He cleaned, he cooked.
The roles weren't so defined.
No, and I think because my mom worked and because she worked in healthcare and worked odd hours, he didn't always have a choice. I don't know. But, he likes to cook. He likes to bake. He does those kinds of things. So I didn't feel it so much at home, but at church you would see it and feel it, and I didn't like it. But I think even though I kind of had those questions, I really didn't take it very seriously. I really just kind of put it on the shelf. Just kind of, it is what it is. I'll figure it out later, right? Like they're like how they talk about it. We'll all know later. Like we'll all, when we die, it'll all make perfect sense. So I didn't think too much about it. But then I graduated high school, went to college, eventually got married, and eventually had my daughter. And I think when she was a baby, that was pretty significant time for me. I think I wasn't working at the time. Like I was on my maternity leave, so I was home, and there was a lot going on with Kate Kelly and John Dehlin.
Okay.
And the ordained women, and I was kind of listening to some of John Dehlin's stuff on Mormon stories.
Oh,
and,
really?
Well, and I think that was more when he was he was talking just, he was still a member of the church.
Yeah.
And I think he was still coming from it from more of a perspective of just wanting to learn, just education. Like
he was definitely still being or trying to be faithful in his answers and stuff, but still like dealing with some hard things. Yeah. So I remember the first time I even heard about John Dehlin was from somebody who said like, oh, he's an apostate. And I think it was like maybe only 6 months or so before he got excommunicated that I even heard his name. So I was aware that he was a podcaster, and I was aware that he was going apostate, I'm using air quotes, and that he was being excommunicated for it.
Yeah.
And that's it. Like I would have never listened. I never would have searched him out and listened to his podcast just based on the information that I heard. So how did you hear about him first? And did you think, like, were you afraid to listen to him or no?
I don't even remember how I stumbled upon him, because this was 2013. So this was before you could like pull it up on your phone. Like you had to be like on your computer, like to listen.
Okay.
So I honestly don't remember. I must have been searching for something. I was listening. I found him, and I think I found Feminist Mormon Housewives or Mormon Feminist Housewives.
Yes, I love Feminist Mormon Housewives.
Yes. I think I was kind of looking. I was looking to see, does someone like me fit in the church?
Oh, okay.
Because I wasn't, I didn't have these aspirations of having like the 9 kids and staying home. And we had actually been married for a long time before we even had our daughter. And I didn't really feel like I fit in, because I was much more of a feminist mindset and more of a liberal mindset. And I didn't really feel like I fit in. Yeah. So I think what I was probably looking for in this time frame was just like, does someone like me fit in the church? And how do they fit in the church? So I think that's why I kind of gravitated towards people like ordained women. Even though I had zero, I didn't want the priesthood.
Yeah. But did you agree with her mission or like what she was doing?
Yeah. Yeah. I very quickly was like, well, I don't want the priesthood. However, I have friends and family members that are divorced that don't have a priesthood holder in the house. Mm-hmm. And I feel for them that if they want a priesthood blessing or whatever, they have to go, or if their kids need one, they have to bring someone from the outside in. And if you're sometimes maybe dealing with very sensitive issues, that's really hard to do. Yeah. And so I was like, I don't see why this is a problem. Why can women not give blessings of healing? I mean, we talk so much about how, like, the church talks about how, like, women are so, nurturing and so, and it's like, why would it not make sense that they couldn't give blessings of healing? Mm-hmm. If they're supposed to be so intuitive and in tune and part of their families, why wouldn't they be able to? Yeah. And so, I gravitated towards that, and I gravitated, I think, because with the Mormon stories, because I was just kind of interested in listening a little bit about the history, and that's kind of what he was more into. And I just kind of found it interesting. And
did you find the Year of Polygamy podcast I'm trying to think when she started that. It probably wasn't that early.
I don't remember when she started. I didn't actually my husband was the one that introduced me to that.
Okay. Because she was recently the Feminist Mormon Housewives. Yes. That was, okay.
Yeah, I don't think I put 2 and 2 together. Until recently. Actually, I've been listening to her stuff right now.
Oh, I freaking love the Year of Polygamy.
It's interesting. Woo! Yeah, no, my husband loves it. And he's like, you need to listen to it.
Yeah. So that's so interesting. Mm-hmm. One thing that I find super interesting is that long ago, you were having these thoughts and thinking the empathy and compassion that it takes for you to look outside of yourself and say, I personally don't want the priesthood, but I think that other people should be able to have it because of this and this and this circumstance. Right. I wish that I had been more like that, because at that stage in my life, I was like, well, sucks to be you. I mean, I literally should
have married better.
Yeah, right. I had no empathy. Yeah. I was an asshole. I just thought, well, there's just one way to do this, and if you don't do it that way, that's wrong. I remember thinking that Kate Kelly is wrong for pressuring the brethren to do something, and they talk to God, and so who is she to say what they should do? Right. I was not in that space at that time, so I'm really impressed that you felt that way, and I'm sure there's others too, but that's one of the things I'm the most ashamed of, is just what an asshole I was. I really was. Very black and white thinking. No compassion for people who were...
But why should you have compassion when you grow up with a church that doesn't have compassion for those that are different? Totally. Why should you?
Yeah, totally. I mean... So I was a better Mormon than you. Is that what you're saying?
You were... I bet you got all of the front row parking, at the grocery store.
Yeah, I was living my religion perfectly. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh my God. That's embarrassing. Okay.
But I was searching for that. And I think for me, because I think Kate Kelly got excommunicated first. And I remember when she got excommunicated, and then shortly after John Dehlin did, that felt very significant to me. But like I would go to church and I was like expecting to hear about them. I heard nothing.
Nobody talked about them.
No,
Not my Lord either.
But it felt like this should be a big thing.
I just heard about it like on the news and stuff.
Right?
And seriously, my thought was like, well, that's what you get.
Sucks to be you.
Right?
Stay in line.
Seriously. That did not make me question anything.
No. But for me, what it taught me is there really wasn't a place for me. Because these were the people that I actually kind of connected with in my own little world. I felt like if I was to sit down and have a chat with them, they would understand me.
Yeah.
And they're getting excommunicated, one right after the other.
They're getting kicked out.
And I realized that it really kind of ended all of my questioning for the time being.
Oh.
It did.
How so?
Well, because that possible price of asking too many questions was too high.
Oh, okay. So you saw that as almost like a warning, which is what they wanted you to see, right?
Absolutely.
It's like, okay, if you step out of line, you're in trouble. So was it kind of this, you were like, oh, okay, I just got to stay on the road.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I just kind of put it all away and I set it aside and I just said, I am not mentally ready to go down this path and see where it ends.
Okay. But you were also thinking to yourself, there's not a place for me in the church. Interesting. Okay.
It's a weird place to be because I personally, for me, never had a ton of Mormon friends because I never felt like I could really be myself. Like, did I care about rated R movies? No. Yeah. Did I care about swearing? No. Like, did I care about a dirty joke? No.
Yeah. Interesting.
But I didn't like, there were very few people throughout my life that I could be really good friends with that were Mormon. Because I really only want to be friends with them if I could be myself.
Yeah.
Tell a dirty joke or they tell the dirty joke. Like,
yeah. And you could laugh about it and not feel bad. Not have to go confess to the bishop that you laughed about the word penis.
Right?
I don't know.
We're so grown up.
I reverted back to my childhood because I never got to do that.
Never got to say funny things like that.
Never got to make sex jokes. That was so inappropriate.
No, I never heard a sex joke until after I got married.
Oh, really?
Then my family, like my aunts and uncles, also became a lot more crass. Like,
oh, really?
Once you're married, then you were in.
Then you get the jokes?
Then you get the jokes.
Like, did you maybe hear them before, but you didn't get them? Oh, okay.
No, they didn't. They didn't say the jokes.
Oh, okay.
Then once you got married, you got into the club.
Oh, I was so prudish that if in high school, if I would have heard a sex joke, I seriously would. I was such a prude. I'd be like, oh my gosh, you're so immature.
No, so that was me though. Like I went to church and kind of put it back on the shelf.
So you're like, stay in line and also just put your thoughts and feelings on the shelf that you don't belong here. You just gotta shut up.
Right.
And get along.
And hope it gets easier. Hope it gets better. That was me. And I struggled a lot too when the church came out with their policy back in 2015.
Yeah.
Because we have several friends who are, gay or lesbian. We have a couple of transgender friends. And
even at that time in 2015, you did.
Our two friends that are transgender, did not know them then, but we had several gay friends during this time frame. And for me, I always was just kind of like, I don't really care what other people do.
Yeah.
I don't want people in my business. Right. I don't want to be in their business.
Right.
So that was hard. And I didn't even know what was even coming in my own life either at this time, but it was still something that very much bothered me. And I, at the time, where they had some big resignations, there was a part of me that was just like, I wish I could do that. Really? I wish I could have the courage to do that. So
you were aware of the resignations. You were aware of the backlash and people being really upset about it. And you were kind of wishing that I
wish I had that courage to do it. I'm like, I don't have the balls to do that.
So what did you tell yourself? Because this is something that Mormons do. When something's uncomfortable, they have to justify it, right? They have to make an excuse or an explanation or justification of whatever.
Yeah.
Do you remember what you were telling yourself about that? Or did you not give an explanation or an excuse? Was it just this is not okay?
It was not okay, and I kind of naively thought, but I can be that one in the ward that can stand up. I can talk about my gay friends.
I can be progressive Mormon.
I can be a progressive or open-minded Mormon.
Yes. I got to that stage in like 2018.
Yeah. So that's what me like 2015. Like
You're way
I
ahead
can
of
be
me.
I can be that person. I can change the attitudes in the world.
Yes. And do you think, was it also like, oh, the culture sucks, but the church is still true?
Yeah, probably a bit of that too.
Yeah.
But
and although you weren't in Utah, which, oh my God,
No.
Utah Mormon culture is the worst.
It's tough.
But I remember thinking, in the justification that I gave, I remember when that policy came out, I was serving in the Young Women's. I was in the presidency. And I remember thinking, this does not feel good.
Right.
This is gross.
And I was surprised too, because I always had thought Monson, I don't remember him ever really saying anything about.
It seemed out of character for him.
It did.
Right?
Now, when you
That's
realize
because it was.
it's because it wasn't him.
Exactly.
But then but I didn't know at the time that he had
dementia,
and that he really he was not in charge, because that's not what they were.
No, they would never tell you that.
No.
Yeah.
And so I was very surprised and kind of hurt over that, because I was like, I had always really liked him. I found him to be someone that, even as a kid, I liked when he talked in conference, because he told stories. Yeah, it wasn't fear based. I don't know, and maybe I'm wrong. Maybe some of his stuff was fear based. I don't remember.
But I don't remember feeling that from him, for sure.
No. Yeah. So I was very surprised by that and a little hurt.
I remember telling myself, there must be something that God knows that I don't know.
Right.
About that 2015 policy. I was like, well, that doesn't feel right, but they must know something I don't know.
Right.
And just justifying it as, well, it must be right. That must be what God wants.
Right.
Yeah. I roll my eyes. Yeah. So that's how I excused it.
Yeah.
Is like, well, because what's the scripture? God's ways are higher than our ways. And, we don't know everything. And so I would always defer my own knowing for what they were telling me. I always did that. I was very good at it.
Because that's how you grew up.
Yeah, I was very good at that.
That's how I grew up too. When it comes to things you don't understand, you look to the higher being, you look to the prophet, and they understand better than we do.
Totally.
And I thought I could be that person in church of being that one who's going to stand up and say stuff. But what you realize is really fast is they don't like it when you do that. And you go to raise your hand and you can see their look of like, oh shit, she's the one that's raising her hand right now. Like,
oh shit, she's going to say something
What
again.
is she going to say today? Totally. They don't like that.
No, they don't.
They have,
and you start to get a reputation.
Yes.
Like, you're the one in the
You're combative.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Or you're negative.
Yeah.
Right. So eventually I just kind of went back
to
you make us think.
You make us think, and we don't like to think because
it's uncomfortable.
It's uncomfortable. Yeah, totally.
Yeah. So we just kind of, just trucked along with that. My kind of turning point, though, I was actually already inactive starting about 2018. So I went through a really traumatic experience in 2018, and honestly, it could be a whole other podcast on that trauma and PTSD and the church and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So I won't really get into that. But I found very quickly that suffering with PTSD and dealing with the legal system, I was having to deal with the legal system. I was not in a good place to go to church. Yeah. I wouldn't go and have a good experience, and probably because I was already having my own struggles already. But
then church wasn't bringing you any sort of peace like it's supposed to do.
It was doing the opposite.
Yeah.
Like I was working, and I work with a lot of people, and so I would spend all week with like the happy smiley face, right? Because I had a lot of people coming in and out of my office every day. I was helping to be in charge of a large staff, and I also have a lot of families. I deal with about 200 families a week, plus a staff of about 50 people. So by the time Saturday would come around, like I was tired because I had put that mask on all week. I had ignored those feelings. I was, I was ignoring the anxiety, the issues. And so when I would come to Sunday and I'd go to church, instead of being uplifted, I was so drained. Like I was so tired. So I very quickly realized that if I was going to survive, I couldn't go to church. And so for me, that's like the start of where I stopped going to church. But it wasn't like this big, deal for me because I thought I would go back.
Yeah, it was like, I'm taking a break.
Yep, I'm taking a break until I get my shit back together and I get through this, and then we'll come back to church.
Because things that were being taught or things that people were saying at church were triggering some of that PTSD of what the traumatic experience that you had. And you weren't feeling compassion and empathy and like that it was a safe place for you, right?
And some people too would kind of come in like, I guess, like word vomit on me a little bit.
Oh.
Well, like, because, you know, it...
Like, did everybody at church know what had happened to you?
Yes, because it had gone... Basically, we had someone that forced his way into our home. And tried to physically attack me. And luckily I was not home alone like he thought I was. My husband had left with our dog, and I actually had some family there. And my brother actually fought him off. And so, but he took off into the neighborhood.
Oh, geez.
And so my husband very quickly after coming back, he had posted on the neighborhood Facebook page saying,
look out for this person.
Look out for this guy. He was a neighbor of ours, and look out for him. He's still at large. Cops are on their way. He tried to attack my wife, kind of thing. So, and our boundary, even though we're not in Utah, it's actually our ward, funny enough, is a very small boundary. It's really just this neighborhood we live in.
Oh, wow.
And so a lot of people knew about it.
Yeah.
And so people would come, and I think they were trying to maybe sympathize a little bit, but what they would do is like, oh, well, you know what happened to my brother, sister, uncles, aunt, whatever. And they would tell me this traumatic story. And I was not in a place to hear that.
I think they think that they're like commiserating with you, like hey, we're on equal footing because I've had something bad happen to me too. Do you think? And I think a lot of people do that.
Or like someone in the ward, she had an even worse experience. She'd had a gun pulled on her.
Oh geez, yeah.
And so then part of me kind of almost felt that shame of why she's a fully functioning person. She's not struggling now, and she had a gun pulled on her, for Christ's sake.
And she probably wasn't a fully functioning person.
Probably wasn't.
But of course, what you see is what she wants you to see, right?
Which was, she's doing fine. Yeah. Why can't I get my shit together?
Yeah.
Why am I struggling?
It's a competition of struggling. Yeah. Like, oh, she struggled worse than me, so I should be fine.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That
so,
sucks.
You know, and so I didn't find church to be a good place.
Yeah.
So I decided to stop going and thinking I was going to go back. And then 2020 hit and everything shut down.
Yep.
And that was the same time where my husband could finally be done and not, because he really didn't want to go to church, but was not in a place where he could at the time.
So when you stopped going to church, he kept going. Oh, I didn't know that. Okay.
And not because he wanted to,
but he felt obligated to.
He did, because
he had a calling.
He had a calling, and also because we don't live in Utah, but he worked for a Mormon-based company. And so our bishop at the time was his boss's boss.
Oh my gosh.
So you can't really he didn't feel like he could really go inactive.
You had an excuse,
I did,
in quotes,
to
nobody
not
questioned
go to
church. And he didn't. So he's like, damn, I don't have an excuse. I have to go. So was he taking your daughter too?
Yeah, he was.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it was more just because it gave me a couple hours to just be by myself and do my own thing and kind of recharge for the week. So he would take her and they would go. Yeah. But when everything shut down,
2020 happens and it's this huge relief. Yeah. Oh, I don't have to go anymore. Yeah. For him.
Yeah. And then this is kind of where we get to the main part of this story, which was basically I guess it's been more closer to about a year and a half, is when my dad came out to his family. And I'm not really going to get into, I'll respect that privacy of why it came out and all those kinds of things. I want to respect him and my mom, but more we'll talk about as a grown daughter of someone, of how this has affected me. And I really want to say that as we talk about the feelings, the emotions, the reactions, I have never been upset about my dad's sexual orientation. Yeah. It's never been something that has upset me or angered me. Right. So when I'm talking about some of the things that I kind of personally went through.
Yeah. The things you were upset about, the things that you struggled with, it wasn't because he was gay. No. That wasn't the issue.
Correct. It wasn't because of that. And because I've always believed, as long as I can really remember, I never thought this was a choice. Like, I never thought your sexual orientation was a choice. You know, family relationships are complicated.
Yeah.
Even in the best of circumstances.
Right.
And so I've gone through a lot of emotions over the past 1.5 to 2 years. And sadly, honestly, one thing I will say about it is this was not my dad's choice to come out. And when you and I kind of were talking, this whole thing with Rebel Wilson came out and how she was basically forced to also open up about her sexual identity. Yeah. And
she was forced out of the closet.
It pissed me off beyond belief because I'm like, why are we still why are we still weaponizing people's sexuality? And you know, and it still happens.
Oh yeah.
People feel if you are just not a straight person, that they can weaponize your sexuality sometimes. And so I felt for her. I was pissed for her. Yeah. And I was pissed for my dad because this wasn't his choice to come out.
Yeah. I wasn't even aware of the Rebel Wilson thing until you told me about it. Yeah. I didn't follow that story. I didn't even hear about it in the news, but then you told me about it and I looked it up and I was like, oh, geez. Right. Like, why? Why is this a thing? Right. Why is that something that anybody feels... Oh, anyways. Yes. We could vent about that for a bit.
So, basically what happened was we didn't even know that this was going to happen. We were dealing with the immediate after effects of a natural disaster. We had been without power and water for several days. And so I had talked to my dad and asked if they had power. They live about 30 minutes away from us. They have had power and water. And so I'd asked, like, could we come up? Could we take showers? Could we just not have to deal with this for a little bit? Yeah. And he said yes. So we were already a very high level state of stress. There was damage to our house. There was issues going on. So when we got there, this was the last thing that I thought we were going to have was, you know, this coming out from my dad.
Oh, that's when he came out, is when you went to their house during this whole thing. Yeah. Oh gosh. Okay. Yeah. So you don't see that coming. No. You're already on high alert, just trying to live your life. Right. And then he sits you down and says, hey, I got to tell you something. Yeah. Oh man. Yeah. Okay.
Timing's terrible.
Yeah.
And I remember just kind of being very, very surprised. And I remember telling my dad that I wasn't concerned or upset about his sexuality. I just wanted to make sure he was okay. And I wanted to make sure my mom was okay. Yeah. One of the things I was worried about was, because of the way it was coming out, I was worried about him taking his own life. We have had suicide issues. Yeah. In my family and with some friends, we've lost several friends and family members to suicide. So that was something that I actually was very concerned about.
Yeah, and so, his mental health.
Yeah. Because this was something that, honestly, when I think about it, this is something that he had feared would come out for his entire life.
He had been living in a closet. Yeah. Fearing
this coming out. And here we are playing this out. His worst fear is coming to fruition that everybody's finding out now.
Yeah. And I can imagine that feels like my life is over. Yeah. Everything's coming crashing down. Yep. Everything's ruined.
Gonna lose everything.
Everything I've built up my whole life. Yeah. And it's really a facade, right? Yeah. Which is part of the pain. Yeah. Because it's like, now everybody knows that I'm not who I said I was.
Right. Yeah. And that's hard. Yeah. That's hard. So I remember telling him that. I remember just kind of, my initial reaction was, are you okay? Is my mom okay? Yeah. Yeah. And I think I very, very quickly went almost like into autopilot and kind of numb, because I was trying to be an emotional support to my mom. Yep. I was also trying to be a mother.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I was working, and it's not like I could go to work and be like, guys, there's a lot going on right now.
Yeah.
I couldn't do that.
Couldn't open up about
open up what was going on. I think all I told my boss was, shit has hit the fan, and there's a lot going on right now. And I didn't even really tell her what was going on. Yeah. So again, I'm going back to that, putting on the smile, pretending everything's fine, stuffing all of those feelings down. Yep. And my mom was completely devastated.
Oh, I'm sure.
Because they'd been married for almost 40 years.
Your mom had never known until this point.
No. Wow. Yeah. I don't know if there were suspicions at any time. I don't know. Like, I've never really asked her that. Like,
but as far as you know, this came out of left field. Yeah.
So she's devastated. Someone she's been married to for 40 years. So where I talk about I have trust issues,
yeah, no shit. She's got trust issues.
How does she trust anybody?
Yeah.
Because that's,
I
mean, this is your significant other. This is your partner. This is someone you've been with for 40 plus years.
I can't even imagine.
No, and to have a secret come out after that much time, and not just like a little secret, like that's a pretty
life-altering secret.
That's a big secret.
So, do you mind me asking, what was your perception of their marriage before that point? Like, would you have said that they had a happy marriage, that they were okay, or that they were just,
It's hard. I think it's hard. I think because there was factors of they've been married for a long time, so I think they had their own rhythm. They were kind of doing their own things in a lot of ways. I think there were a lot of struggles.
Yeah, like every marriage has. But did you think that their marriage was different than most in any way? Like, you just thought they were normal, like they had struggles, but they still they stuck through it.
Yeah, they stuck through it.
Yeah.
It's a hard one to answer, because I just felt like, I think growing up I didn't really notice much. I think as an adult though, I would notice things that they weren't very affectionate.
Yeah.
And, and I think my dad was becoming more and more of the attitude of, I've done my duty. I've raised my kids. I've been the provider. I'm going to do what I want to do now.
Oh, okay.
And so he was definitely doing a lot of other things as far as like, I mean, I swear he was picking up a new hobby like every day.
Yeah.
But I think he was trying to now that I know what was going on, I think he was trying to fill a void that we didn't understand at the time.
Totally.
But I think as an adult, I saw more of like, I don't know. But then I would look at other people's parents too, of those who were like, married for a long time. And I would kind of, they didn't seem that
people
off.
are.
Right. It didn't seem, I don't see these couples who've been married for 50 years like making out in the back of the car.
That would be weird if you did.
Right.
Oh, goodness.
So I think I had like questions about it. But at the same time, I don't know if I really put a lot of thought into it prior. But now all of a sudden everything's being scrutinized. Like,
for sure.
And, and now I've got parents that are having two different experiences. My dad, in a lot of ways, and I'm not blaming, I'm not upset about this. At the time I kind of was, it was almost a relief for him.
Oh yeah. And
that's completely valid. So there was almost this like kind of euphoric, like, it's out. And
he felt free for the first time in his life. Yeah.
All the while, so he's feeling this unburdening.
Yeah.
And the rest of us were getting this burden placed on us.
Ooh,
and the devastation that it was causing with my mom, and and she's going through hell. And so I kind of struggled with trying not to be upset over that and trying to realize that his feelings were valid, that this is something that had finally come out and he could finally be open about. And he deserved to have some of that relief. Right. But it was very hard to also see my mom struggle in this way. Not just a little bit. Like, she was shattered.
Oh my gosh. I can't even imagine.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that doesn't just, when he feels that relief. Yeah. It's the burden didn't go away. It just
it shifted
on your mom and your siblings and like... And it is so hard because there's so many feelings around it. Like, you do feel happy for him to be able to be himself and finally be honest, but the aftermath is very
the price of that was very high.
The price of that was very high. Yep.
And that's where you're just like, well, how do you do this now? How do you support both parents? Yeah. How do you support a dad who's now come out and is happy to be out? And how do you support a mom who has just had the rug pulled out from underneath her and is in a position she never thought she would be in?
And so when he came out, I don't know why, but just like, I'm trying to picture the scene of like, is he standing there with your mom as your mom, like, being like his support system? Like, of course she found out before you found out, right? And did he verbalize to you guys what him coming out meant for their relationship or for your family moving forward? Was that ever part of the conversation?
It was. So my mom was actually out of town when all of this came out.
Oh my gosh.
There. And that's also part of it.
Okay, so she wasn't there when he told you.
Right. And when he told her, it was on the phone.
Oh my God. Yeah. I'm so sorry.
So it was one of those things, and that's also where my concern was of like, I just need to make sure you're okay, because he was alone at the house.
Yeah.
And he did say, you know, I want to try to work this out with your mom if she wants to.
Okay.
So, but, you know, that's a complicated road. Mm-hmm. that's not cut and dry.
There's nothing simple about that. Yeah.
And so he did say from the very beginning he wanted to try to work this out with my mom. You know, and he did apologize too about not being honest about it, you know. And, you know, I think for me though, I just that conversation with him, because I knew he was alone at the house and stuff, I really didn't say a whole lot. It just was, I'm glad you're okay. I want you to be okay. I called my mom that night. I talked to her that night. It was not a conversation of many words, you know, because she was trying to process all of this.
Yeah, she was probably super emotional.
Very emotional. And I had told her, I said, if you want to come stay at our house for a little bit, if, you know, while you sort your feelings out, you most certainly can. And that was kind of the initial part of it. But life still had to go on. Like, I still had, this was, I don't remember what day it was. It was the middle of the week, and actually everything had been closed for that week because schools had been closed that week because everybody was trying to deal with this disaster. Yeah. So I had a couple of days before I had to go back to work, but that following Monday I had to go back to work, and I very quickly identified that some of those PTSD feelings were back, and I had to really stuff everything down because I couldn't sit there and be like, I'm sorry guys, like, I'm sorry I'm in a bad mood today, like I have a lot going on. I had to pretend everything was fine, and it wasn't something I felt like I could talk with any of my friends, because again, this wasn't about me, this was about my mom and dad, and they haven't really told anybody what's going on. So I didn't feel like I could talk to my friends. Basically the only person I talked to was my husband, who is very close with my parents and was also very hard on him too. You know, this was also an emotional roller coaster for him. And my daughter was too young to really understand what was going on, and so she didn't really understand, like, if you've got that short fuse, I just had to be like, I'm sorry, this isn't you. Mommy's just having a really hard day. Really hard day. So I think I very quickly went into autopilot, numb, survival mode. I didn't talk about it a whole lot, but it was hard because I'm the only sibling that lives close to my parents. And so, you know, in the weeks afterwards, we'd go up to their house, and sometimes it would be fine, felt normal. And sometimes it was very, very tense, and you could tell that stuff had been going down.
Like that they had just been fighting or
having an emotional conversation. Because even though there was no guarantee that they were going to be able to work this out, right? You know, and so sometimes
they're still not.
Then there's I mean, they are still together. But there is no guarantee with that, and I've told both of them that I just want them to be happy together or not together. You know, if to stay together, because I feel like the church puts so much emphasis on marriage and stuff like that. I had told my mom, I was like, you are not trapped. You can leave too. If you are not happy, you can leave. And
so tell me about where they're, like, how this relates to their testimonies of the gospel or their, you know, living the Mormon life. When he comes out, how does that play out? I'm assuming they were still faithful Mormon at the time that he came out. Did he still have a big calling, or, you know, did that affect that? Like, what happened as far as the church goes?
I don't remember what my dad's calling was at the time. I don't remember what either one of them had at the time. My mom is still very active in the church, and I can't even blame her for it. Like,
yeah, it's probably a lifeline for her.
It is. Yeah. I mean, I look at someone, she's in her 60s. She's lived this her entire life. I don't know if she could I don't know if she could start over. I don't know how, I mean, I think you and I have talked about it. Someone who can start over later in life, like, props to them. Because
It's way harder later in life, for sure.
I mean, and so she's still very active. She has a calling. I think she's like the visiting teacher, supervisor. I know they don't call them visiting teachers anymore, but
I don't know what it's called.
Just, my dad tried to make it work for a while with the church. I think he's become more and more detached from it. And a lot of it is because of how the church treats people of the queer community.
Yeah.
So I feel bad for my mom. I mourn for her because I know her sitting alone at church is not how she ever thought her life was going to be. Like, I think she thought, having kids get married in the temple. I'm sure, like, she thought her and my dad were going to go serve missions.
Yep.
Have her grandkids, a part of the church, and she's the only.
That's not going to happen.
No. And I feel for her because I think that's very sad for her.
Yeah.
It's not how she pictured it. Right. At all.
And do you know whether, like, the people in the neighborhood or the ward also know the situation?
Some do. Okay. So they've been a little more, I think they have also opened up a bit more and more as time has gone on. Yeah. My mom definitely, I think, when this all first came out, I think my mom was really leaning pretty heavy on me for support.
For emotional support, yeah.
And it was sending me spiraling.
Yeah.
And because it's very stressful because I just didn't know what I was going to walk into. I didn't know anytime I got a phone call from one of my parents or a text message from one of my parents, or if I walked into the fucking house, if I was going to have some other, bomb dropped on me. And so it was very, very emotional. And so I think my mom realized pretty quickly that having your kids be your emotional support was not the way to go. Yeah. And so she started seeing a therapist, although it was still through the LDS church services. Of course. I mean, her justification was she wanted someone who could understand where she was coming from. Yeah.
I totally get it though. Yeah.
And she started opening up with, they had just moved into a new ward, and so she made some friends, and like, I know that she's opened up with them about it. And I think that's kind of taken that pressure off of her needing her kids to be that emotional support, because we ourselves were trying to figure out how we were doing. Right. We were also in survival mode too. We were also part of that collateral damage. Totally. Because for me, after, when I was going through this like autopilot thing, I mean, I also had a lot of confusion too, because I was like, was this all a lie? Yeah, because suddenly your whole life is in question. Everything that you knew to be true, like your very existence, is in question about why do you even exist? Why are you in, like you came from this marriage that suddenly is like, is this a legitimate marriage? Do they love each other? Should this have ever even happened? You know, I totally get that, because it's like existential crisis of your whole life. Yeah, because you're like, was the marriage just a facade? Was it just a front? Totally. So if that's was having kids a front? Was having like, am I just a front? Am I just someone to deflect any suspicions off of you? Like, you go through that a bit.
Totally. I can totally see that.
Where is my place in all of this?
Yeah, because you and your siblings, you were all your dad's beard. Like, you know that term when they say like, oh, that's his beard. That's, you were covering up his sexuality, right? Yep. And so that fucks with your brain.
It does.
For sure.
And I think I spent some time and I think that's how I kind of shifted. I think I shifted probably after a month or two of just being numb and just being in survival mode. And at some point, my dad came over to, it's probably about 6 to 8 weeks after he came out. Okay. And he came out, and my brother was in town. Okay. It's the first time my brother had been in town since all this had come out. And my brother was staying at our house. My dad just showed up and wanted to have a conversation and wanted to talk about it. And I think I'd had an emotional conversation with my mom earlier that day, because we'd had dinner over there. I think my emotions were starting to bubble over more and more. And so when my dad came in and wanted to talk about it, I probably didn't react the best to it.
Yeah.
I mean, I know I've not been perfect in this situation. I probably have said things that have not always been the nicest. But I remember very quickly being very angry. And part of it I felt like was because my dad up to this point had not really talked to us about how we were doing. But now that my brother's in town, and now he wants to talk. He wants to talk. But it was clear I felt like he wanted to more talk to my brother.
Yeah.
And my brother is a quiet person, doesn't say much. He was kind of chatting, and he had made this comment to my brother, like, well, you know, how are you feeling and stuff. And my brother didn't say much. And then he finally looked at me and he's like, well, how are you doing? And I kind of let loose on it. Very honest about, I realized at that moment I was very angry. And not angry at a sexuality.
No, right.
I think in that moment I realized I was very angry that I had spent my whole life being forced into a religion. It was a religion I don't think my dad even really wanted to be a part of.
Yeah.
Feeling like I was a front and feeling like he had used us in a way, I guess. And so I just told him, I said, I'm very angry and I'm very upset and I don't know how to trust you. How do you trust someone who has not been honest, and not even about your sexuality, but not being honest about how you felt about the church?
Yeah.
Because for me growing up, and I think my siblings we've all had different experiences. I think for me, I've had the hardest time with all of this because being the oldest, there was so much more pressure on me to make sure I did all the right things in church. And I felt like with my dad that if I wanted his approval, his consistent approval, it was doing stuff in the church, doing the right things in the church, following that path. And so I think when we were talking, it really just like, it kind of just blew up on me a little bit of just like, I don't know where to go from here. Yeah. I've got a mom who is just, I can physically see the pain on her face. And, you know, I've got, and like I said, it's completely valid, but I have a dad in another way who's being like completely euphoric.
Yeah, totally.
And I'm stuck in the middle here trying to figure out how this all fits together and where do we go from here. And I told him, you know, because I did trauma counseling after my experience, and I told him, I said, I can always control our feelings. Yeah. In that evening, I was very emotionally tired, very much struggling, very much all of a sudden feeling my feelings, probably for the first time since this had all come out.
Yeah, like the numbness had worn out.
It had worn out.
It's just part of the stages, right? Of grief, of whatever it is. Like, we have, you know, the feelings just wait for you. Yeah. When you're numbing, they're there. They're going to wait until,
And they sometimes don't come out at the best.
Yes. They explode all at once.
But I was angry. I mean, I was angry at how this was affecting my mom. I didn't feel like it was fair. She had done everything right.
Of your mom.
Yeah. You know, she had done everything she was supposed to do. She got married in the temple to return missionary. You know, she had her kids. She was a faithful member. Like, this isn't supposed to be her life.
Well, and also, okay, maybe this is a little bit of a tangent, but I'm also thinking about it from the church's perspective. Yeah. A woman cannot get to heaven without a man. Right. So she did everything she could to have a man bring her into heaven. And now suddenly, at no fault of her own, she has no connection to God.
It's all in jeopardy.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, all of a sudden, it's been severed. And she's like, well, now what do I do? Right. Because our worth is completely tied up in whether we have a righteous priesthood holder man in our lives. Right. Which is total bullshit. Right. So your poor, poor, poor mom is trying to figure out all of that.
Her whole life.
She's
60-something years old trying to figure out her whole life.
Yeah.
You know, and I was very upset over that. And it really took him by surprise.
Yeah, it took him by surprise. Your dad
did. Because I hadn't said much up to this point.
But he didn't even think that you would be mad?
I don't know what he thought. I think maybe he just thought I think he thought this was going to be a kumbaya conversation.
Yeah, because initially you were, you know, very supportive, and it's not about his sexuality. Right. You're like, I'm supportive of that. I just want you to be happy. But there is some shit you got to clean up over here. Right?
Lots of issues. he was really surprised by that. And he became very defensive. And this is where we kind of probably had our first conversation about the Mormon church and the teachings and how he had really internalized that, because he was born in the 50s and he grew up in a conservative town, completely, almost 100%, almost completely Mormon.
Yeah.
And the church had a lot of thoughts on the queer community.
Totally.
And, we've talked about it. I know you have it, like, when I was preparing for this podcast and I was trying to find some of these different things that were said, my husband was like, go Google On the Record.
Yeah.
You do not need to reinvent the wheel.
Yeah. It's already
all of it's
done
there.
for you.
All of it's there. And so I went and looked at, like, On the Record.
Okay, so just for our listeners, tell them what that is.
So it is done. There's a podcast, Latter Gay Stories.
Mm-hmm. Kyle Ashworth.
Yes. And he put together this document of basically everything the church has said about the LGBTQ plus community. Mm-hmm. I mean, they have stuff
like from the beginning of time.
Yeah. And it's all there, and it's a working document. And so, I mean, it is, let's see here, 97 pages.
Oh my God.
Now, this isn't all like just straight writing, but if you Google it, you can Google On the Record, and I think I put On the Record Latter Gay Stories.
Okay. Yeah, so go look it up if you get a chance, because it's fascinating.
It'll make your blood boil.
It'll make you pissed off. It'll make you sad.
Yeah.
It'll make you, if you're not already feeling that. Yeah. But it is really interesting to see how it's changed so much over time.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, and so when when my dad talks about what he grew up hearing, and I can read this here, the very first thing that they have on here is they have all the words that have been used to describe someone who is queer.
Yeah. And
it's diabolical, blasphemy, pervert, unnatural, abnormal, an affliction, immoral, impure, victim, under the control of Lucifer, weak, transgressor, evil, ridiculous, sinful, ugly, predator.
Wow, ugly? Oh my God.
Sin of the ages, deceitful, abominable, detestable, crime against nature, confused, degenerate, addict, unmanly, unseemly, desperate, diseased, helpless, promiscuous, enslaved, contaminate, carnal, selfish, aggressive, brutal, abusive, violent, hopeless, corrupt, filthy, dreadful, unhappy, counterfeit.
Oh my God.
That's just their first page.
Oh my God. Yeah, that list is insane.
So
ridiculous stood out to me. It said ridiculous.
Oh,
that was a word that they used to describe a queer person, is ridiculous.
And unmanly.
Of course, unmanly. I mean, some of those descriptions are so painful to hear. Yeah.
It's painful. And I think, we started that conversation.
You know what? That list is so un-Christ-like. I can't even.
Right.
Like, these are people who claim to follow Christ.
And one of the things that I have honestly struggled with, and I will say, when we had that conversation, I don't think I was really in a place to really, digest it.
Yeah.
Because I was angry.
And that's fine. Yes.
And that conversation kind of got turned onto us as far as what our activity level was and things like that. So
wait, how did it get turned?
I don't even remember.
Okay, I was gonna say, did your dad bring that up?
He did.
Say, are you living righteously? Or it wasn't that?
It felt that way.
Oof.
It did. Which
that would
was
be hard.
why are we talking about us? Why is this about us now?
Yeah.
But after that conversation, after some time has obviously passed, because that was a little over a year ago.
Okay.
I can tell you that as I really have sat and thought about that, one of the things that I think about over and over again as a parent, I think about when I look at my daughter and I go, if she is created in mine and my husband's image, right? Just like how they say that we are created of Heavenly Father's image. I would go to the ends of the earth for her. And why a God would make somebody and then say that they were, I don't know,
All of those things. Just pull out a few of them.
diabolical, a predator, corrupt, filthy.
Yeah.
It didn't make sense to me.
No, it doesn't.
It doesn't make sense to me. Mm-mm. I don't understand I just don't understand it. I don't understand how someone could create someone in their image, but then also say, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
It's going to be impossible to come back home.
Yeah.
I would never do that to any of my kids.
No.
Like, I don't care. I don't care what they've done.
That goes against everything we've ever been taught that God is.
Right.
Right? And so that's where so much of the disconnect happens.
Right.
You're like, wait a sec.
Right.
God is supposedly our Father who loves us infinitely. More than our earthly father could ever love us. Right. He wants us to return to him, but then he makes a pretty high percentage of his children gay, which makes them almost
or transgender,
right,
or pansexual,
or anywhere on the spectrum of queerness, right? Yeah. He makes it so it's virtually impossible for them to return to him,
and that's not even
based on the Mormon rules, right?
And that's not even getting into why with blacks in the priesthood, because now you have another percentage of people who supposedly can't. Now that's changed. We don't preach that anymore, right? When I grew up, I 100% heard that people who were of darker skin color were fence sitters.
Oh yeah, in pre-existence.
And they could not have the priesthood. They could not have those ordinances. So what's the point? Why is God creating all of these people and so few of them can return back to him?
Yeah.
But that doesn't make any logical sense to me.
No, it doesn't.
And it didn't and so talking, being with my dad and talking to them, it didn't make sense. And but I was still struggling with, I think a lot of my anger for a long time really was because I had felt forced into living this religion. Yeah. And now this religion was hurting my family. Yeah. And so it was a religion I don't think I necessarily would have chosen to have maybe followed as closely if I felt like I would have had another choice. But my dad didn't really make me feel like I had another choice. Yeah. So you've got this weird balance of things of, I'm sad for you. I'm sad you had to live this way. I'm angry at you because you made me live this way too. Yeah. And it was almost and as I've talked to some of my, with my sister a bit, and it was it almost felt like maybe he felt because he was making this sacrifice to live this way, that if we didn't stay a part of the church, then his sacrifice was for nothing. Yeah. If we weren't active members of the church, temple endowed, all of those things, then why did he do this?
So his sacrifice was dependent on you sacrificing as well. Right. And also, don't you think that you were part of his cover up? Yeah. You had to live a certain way because that was a reflection on him and how he parented and what he did, right or wrong, right? I think we all feel that to a certain extent with our kids. Yeah, because he's trying to put on the show that he has the perfect Mormon family. Right. And so you're a part of that. Right. And you have to follow the rules in order to go along with his portrayal of the perfect.
Well, and I think my brother-in-law kind of made a comment too about it almost maybe felt like, because we can talk about especially when he was growing up and as a young adult, they felt that being queer, you could be cured, and you could be cured through repentance. Totally. And going through the temple and doing those things. And I think maybe he also felt like he needed to double down on all of this. Oh my gosh. Because maybe if he was righteous enough and he did enough, maybe he could be cured. Maybe he could be forgiven. Yeah. Totally. I think there was a part of him too that maybe felt the more he doubled down on it, then maybe he could be cured. Yeah. Because I guarantee, because of the way he was taught, he knew that there was something major wrong with him. Right. That it was something that had to be fixed, that it was a weakness, a trial, whatever. Yeah. And this is how he dealt with it, which is how he was supposed to deal with it. Well, he was given an impossible choice.
Absolutely. Yeah.
You either leave the church and everything you know and risk your eternal salvation. Yep. Or you get married in the temple and hope that will fix everything.
Mm-hmm. And you just put on a smiling face and pretend like everything's fine.
Pray the gay away.
Pray the gay away. Oh,
Pray it away.
Yeah.
And let me tell you, I think if it could be prayed away, my dad would have been
it would
cured,
have been gone. Yeah.
Quote unquote cured decades ago.
Yep.
It doesn't work that way.
Yep. Doesn't work.
It doesn't work that way.
Yep.
He, and I think that's one of the things that, I have really, and still struggle with a little bit, is reconciling that my dad was put in a very tough spot. Yeah. And it wasn't about trying to hurt anybody. I think if he would have had it his way, I don't know if he ever would have come out. Like, I think he would have just kept it to himself, which is sad in its own right.
Right. Is there a part of you that kind of wishes that was the case? That cat had never been let out of the bag?
For him, no.
Yeah.
For my mom, sure. For us, sure. Like, it's such a hard thing to say because it's unfair to ask him to live with that silently. Totally. It's unfair to have my mom and, siblings and stuff also dealing with the aftermath of it too.
Totally.
It's a lose-lose situation for everybody.
It totally is. And that makes me think so much, like when you say it's unfair to ask that of him, that's what the church asked of him. So what they're asking of him and every other person, like your mom, like you guys who are in these situations, they're asking you to do that.
Yeah.
To be in those situations.
Yeah.
And it is absolutely unfair.
Yeah.
And not okay.
Yeah.
And that's what they expect.
And I think I sat in that anger for a while of trying to reconcile all of this. Yeah. How do you be a support for your dad who is out and is being active in the Pride community and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And wanting to be supportive of that. But how do you be supportive of a mom who didn't ask to be in a mixed, the church calls it a mixed orientation marriage. She never asked for that. Yeah. So how do you support one without kind of pissing on the other?
Hurting. Yeah, totally. That's a good way to put it. Yeah.
I haven't figured that out yet.
Yeah. I don't know if there is a way.
I don't know.
Yeah. So that puts you in a very difficult position.
Yeah. And I've said some things, I think like my dad brought something home once and I made a comment about it and I was like, I don't think mom's going to want that. It was a gay pride thing. And I just kind of went, I don't know if mom is going to want to look at that all the time. It's kind of it's a reminder to her of hurtful. What she's going through. Yeah. But I also don't want you to have to stuff everything inside either. So I think I really sat in that for a while. But eventually, I think after a while, I kind of went more into grief. Yeah. And I think people, even if you're not, even if this story is not your story, I think even if you have left the church, you go through these.
Oh, yeah. Every single one of these stages.
You go through shock, you go through anger, you go through confusion, you go through grief. Yeah.
And then you go back to the other ones.
Oh, yeah.
You do it
it's
over
not
and
linear.
over again. Yeah, exactly.
No. It's like you've seen those kind of pictures about weight loss or whatever and you think it's going to be one way and it's straight down. And in reality, it's the squiggle line that's all over the place. 100%. You can feel like you're doing fine and then something can trigger it and you can go right back to being in anger or right back to being in shock or, or grief. It doesn't take much to do that. But I think once I moved out of that anger phase, I moved into the grief because I felt like I was grieving over the fact that the church had such a stranglehold on my family in every way possible. Yeah. And it does in every Mormon family. Yeah. And people who are in the church may not realize that. But I think once you get out of the church, you realize how it's strangling families. And I also don't know if I can ever really have a fully authentic relationship with either of my parents. I think for my dad, he lived in a constant fear.
I'm sure.
Fear, anxiety, depression, all of those things. And also holding back such a big part of your life. I don't know how you can't cultivate a close relationship.
Yeah, real authentic relationships are almost impossible.
And I would say our relationship was never bad. Yeah. But it was never close. Yeah. It's never been close. And I don't know at this point if you can bridge that gap.
Yeah.
because there's decades of feeling, maybe sometimes trying to understand why you're not enough. You know, like why is my dad struggling? Why is my dad sad? Why is my dad angry? Why, you know, sometimes I felt like when I did something that was out of line with the church, it was almost like rage was bubbling under there.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
maybe, I think he internalized that himself, like took it on personally. It's like, your mistake is now my mistake,
right?
Or something.
Or
it's a very codependent way of,
or it'll blow his cover.
Yes, totally.
So there was that fear for me of stepping out of line because I didn't want to deal with that. Yeah. And for my mom, I think now it's hard to have that authentic relationship because we're not a part of the church, and she still is. And so anything we do that is outside of church approved things is sad for her. Yeah. And so you hide a lot of things. You hide the coffee maker. You know?
When she comes over, it's like, oh, put the booze away.
You hide the alcohol or whatever. Like, you hide those parts of you. So how do you have an authentic relationship when, you know, anything you're doing is just hurtful to them?
Totally. And I would imagine that your mom is holding on to the church for dear life at this point. Because I bet to her it feels like the only stable thing she has left.
Right.
And it's like her rock and her foundation, which is what we were constantly taught, right? And if the gospel is her foundation and other things are crumbling out around her, she's gonna grip onto that for dear life, even more so. So it probably does absolutely no good to have conversations with her about the church or about your beliefs or anything that's just hurtful to her, I'm sure, right?
Yeah. Because this is what she's lived her life for.
Yeah.
You know, and she's made a lot of her own sacrifices over the years, you know, and so it's something that I don't have those conversations with her because I don't want to hurt her. I don't want to further hurt her. I don't also like, and by the off chance of maybe it does have an effect on her, I also don't want to like crumble her world in that way.
Right? Can you imagine if she had a faith crisis at this point?
Oh my God, no.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, and the same way with my mom. It's like, well, you know, at this point, she's given up too much. She's dedicated too much. It's too late in her life. Right. Which even though I would be so happy if she could just live her life. I mean, I think a lot of us feel this way when we leave the church. We're like, oh my God, I want everyone else in my life to have what I have. Right. But I think we do have to recognize that it's not always what's best for them. No. Because, you know, it's a survival thing almost at this point, at least for your mom.
It is. Yeah. It's her security blanket. Yeah. And I don't blame her for that one bit.
Not one bit.
But I am sad over the fact that I can't necessarily have some of these conversations with her. Not even about like church related stuff, but I can't be like, well, going to the bar or whatever. Like,
you can't tell her what's going on in your life sometimes.
You can't talk about your life fully. And that makes me sad. That makes me very angry that the church has that. I also
wonder if like you could give her different advice, if you could be fully authentic and honest with her. I think your advice to her about her situation with your dad and stuff might be different. It might be like, you don't need a man to, you know, but like that's drilled into her. Oh yeah. So much so that like she has to give up, you know, maybe not being loved fully in the way that she needs it or wants it or deserves it. Yeah. Because she's sealed to this person. He's going to take her to heaven. That's her only shot.
And divorce, I mean, I think about what she was hearing in the 80s and 90s particular. Oh, yeah. Divorce was a terrible thing. So my mom's a working mom. So she, of course, was terrible for being a working mom.
Oh, yeah.
And divorce on top of that, I mean...
Oh, yeah. It would just
you don't do that. No. I don't know. And, you know, I wonder if she wasn't a part of the church, if she would be fighting as much to keep the marriage intact.
Yeah, I wonder that too.
You know, and even saying, Mom, we don't blame either one of you. Yeah. We don't blame if you guys don't stay together. Yeah. That is not something that is an issue for us. Divorce is not the worst thing in the world. Yeah. But I wonder if had she not grown up having this drilled into her head since she was a child, family, marriage, pinnacle of your existence.
Totally. Totally. I remember having a conversation with my mom. My parents' marriage was terrible always. It just was never a happy marriage. And I remember having a conversation with my mom once saying, Mom, why are you guys still married? Like, it makes no sense to me.
Right.
Like, logically, this makes no sense. Explain it to me. And she's like, I made a covenant.
Right.
And that's literally all she could say.
Oh, yeah.
She had no other explanation for it than I made a covenant.
Right.
But what was interesting is, like, because I think at that point I'd only had one sibling that had gotten a divorce.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that kind of like opened the door for my mom to think, hey, maybe divorce is not the worst thing in the world.
Right.
And eventually my parents did split. But like, I mean, they stayed married for 31 years, I want to say, something like that. And I can pretty much promise you that at least 30 of those years was terrible.
Right.
Like, they might have had a few days here and there, and over 31 years, maybe it adds up to a year of like happy times. Like, they were not happy. And I don't know, I think it is partly like our parents' generation and older generations that like, they didn't have the expectation to be happy.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? Like, like we do. Like, I think we don't accept less than that most of the time.
Well, like, marriage was a security for women.
Yes, because they couldn't have anything if they weren't married.
Yeah.
So now that that's not so much. Yeah. But I do think, like, we have more of an expectation that we're going to be happy. Yeah. And we're going to actually love the person we're married with, too. And I don't think that was in the cards for our parents and our grandparents. Like, it didn't matter almost.
And like you said, especially for Mormon families, you've made that covenant. Yeah. That's a big thing to break.
And once you've done that, you don't have any other, you can't change your mind about
and
that
goes to that, I always hated this saying, that endure to the end. I hated that saying. It sounds so sad.
Totally.
But, I mean, how many families are just enduring and gritting their teeth until the end? Yep. Like, that's a terrible way to live.
Totally.
And that's not even adding, any kind of complications. That's just life.
That's life.
And then if you have, like, where you're struggling in your own marriage, but you don't feel like there's a way out because this is forever. And to get a temple divorce has to go to the first presidency. Yep. I mean, talk about not having autonomy over your own life. Oh, yeah. That's crazy.
Yeah.
I don't understand it. Yeah. At all. Yeah. So I think I really sat in that grief for a long time. I think I grieved over my own missed opportunities.
Oh, yeah.
Because I was definitely one that did not want to step out of line because I did not want to disappoint, specifically my dad. Didn't want to disappoint him because I felt, like I said earlier, consistently, I felt the most love from him when I was doing the right things in the church. And I think about that. I'm like, well, because then his sacrifice was worth it. Because if we were doing the things we needed to do, then I think him staying in the church and getting married and all that kind of stuff, it was worth it. Yeah. And so I think that plays a part of it, of him really, I mean, I would just seek that validation. That validation was more important than anything else, honestly, I think, growing up. And so when this all comes crashing down and you realize that everything what you thought was complete bullshit, you have to grieve over that. Totally.
Absolutely.
100%. But I think after he came out, I didn't really realize this at the time, but it finally freed me up to make my own decisions about the church.
Because you no longer had to be perfect for him?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
That didn't matter anymore.
Yeah.
Because I'm sorry.
Yeah.
You can no longer judge me for my things I do or don't do.
Yeah.
And so it finally gave us the freedom to really make our own decisions. Where, like, the previous years I've been kind of hiding my inactivity and I kind of hid it. And, I was able to brush under the, sweep it under the rug because of trauma and then because of COVID. Yep. And now I can kind of be more forthright about it and no longer have to do any kind of pretending anymore. The burden of seeking validation from my dad in the church was gone. I could finally make decisions on what I thought was correct. And I think also I finally was able to really see and could personally testify of the harm that the church was causing.
Yes.
to not just our family, but to many families, thousands of families.
Yeah.
Thousands of families are dealing with maybe a parent that has come out, maybe a child that has come out.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's a young single adult that is trying to decide like where they need to go in life. And what the sad thing is that these kids who are in college are still faced with the same dilemma my dad was faced with.
Yeah.
They're still basically being told you can still receive your blessings if you live in a way that you're worthy of them.
Yeah. Like the church teaches, oh, well, now it's fine for you to say you're gay, but you just can't act like you're gay.
They don't really want you to say that you're
they don't.
gay.
They don't
like
want you
the
to talk
labels.
about it.
They don't like the labels. Don't label yourself.
Oh, yeah. And they call it same-sex attracted, which is such...
Nobody calls it that.
Such bullshit.
So maybe the church has changed in some ways. They no longer blame masturbation.
Yeah.
They no longer say that it's because you didn't come from a loving home, or it's the mom's fault because you were too close with your mother. You didn't have whatever.
And I think that they're no longer teaching that it can change or that you can make it go away, right?
No,
as far as I know, right?
But we could. They're not. However, I feel like, so looking at when I was going through and doing some research and stuff, I was looking at the church's website. And if you go to the website, the churchofjesuschrist.org.
Don't shorten the name, whatever you do.
Lord. If you go to their topics or whatever, and you look at what they say about the queer community, they have some spots about being transgender, which I'm sorry is terrible. It's really awful. What
they say about it?
Yeah, basically they have said you can have those blessings if you don't do anything surgically.
Yeah, you can't transition.
Right, they don't want you to transition.
Right.
They also have stuff about those who are dealing with same-sex attraction, because that's what they call it.
Suffering with same-sex attraction.
But here's the crazy thing. So when you look, and it has some spots for members, leaders, family and friends, and and they have stories. When you look under the leaders part of it, and they have, why shouldn't leaders encourage heterosexual marriage for those who experience same-sex attraction or identify as gay? And they basically say, we don't counsel this. But here's what they say. You'll see in some of these experiences that are related on the site that it has been a successful experience in some cases, or some have expressed the success they have found in marriage and in raising a family, and in the joy and all that has filled out and bless their lives as a consequence. But that we know that is not always true. And is not always successful. Sometimes it's even been disastrous. No shit, Sherlock.
Wow, they said that? Sometimes it's even been disastrous?
Christopherson said that.
Oh.
No shit, Sherlock. We think it's something that a person can evaluate and they can discuss both with priesthood leaders, families, and others, and make decisions. But we simply don't take a uniform position on saying yes always or no always. So.
Wow. Okay.
They.
Makes sense.
So they're saying, no, don't get married necessarily,
but you could.
There are some people that are successful.
Some people it works for. It's, it's like the, in Dumb and Dumber, which he's like, there's a chance.
So you're saying there's a chance.
She's like, we're like 1 in a million. That's pretty much what the chances are there, right? 1 in a million, yeah.
But
you're saying there's a chance.
But if you go to their story section, this is what I think got my blood boiling, because this is why there are still so many issues within the church, I think, where they say there's really no, don't do this, or live, basically what they want you to do is they want you to live a celibate life, because they're very clear in saying that marriage is only between a man and a woman. So even if you're married to someone who's the same gender, that doesn't count.
That doesn't count.
That's
because it's not in the temple,
right?
Yeah,
it's the sexual sin. And if you go to their member stories, they have 4 stories on there right now, which I think you've said they used to have more, right?
Yeah, they used to have a lot.
Yeah. Now there's 4. 2 of those stories are adults who are married to someone of the opposite gender.
Okay.
So I look and say, if I was someone who was, struggling with same-sex attraction, like they like to call it. If I was a young adult and I was realizing I had feelings for someone of the same gender, and I was to go to this website and I was to look at these stories, and 2 of the 4 stories are people who say they won't even use the label if they're gay or bisexual, which I think is very important.
That's important. Yeah.
Because it's one thing if someone is bisexual and in a marriage.
Right.
Versus someone who is gay and in a marriage, but they don't want to label, so you don't know what these people's sexual orientations are. Maybe they're pansexual,
they're just not straight,
right?
That's the only thing we know. That's about the only thing we stories.
Know. But 2 of the stories are people that are married to the opposite sex, and they have the story of that person. They have the story of their spouse. And one of them has, they've got the bishop's perspective on there. And I was reading all of it. And I'm just like, this is actually very harmful. But, and I think about someone who is trying to figure out, where do they go? Okay, I have feelings for someone of the same sex. Where do I go? If I look at this, they may say, we don't encourage marriage. But when your 2 stories here are people that are married, what are you supposed to think?
Yeah, and they definitely tell the story with rose-colored glasses.
100%.
They're telling about how happy they are together.
Right. And how this has been faith building.
Yes.
And then they have another story. This is the only one where their son has left the church, but they do not talk about they don't have his side of the story.
Oh, yeah, it's only the parents. Yeah,
mom and dad's side of the story.
It's the McIntoshes, right?
They don't.
She's written a book, and
but they don't have his side of the story. Now, whether they asked, I doubt they asked him for his story because he's left. But I found it pretty infuriating at the end of his dad's thing, where he said I feel like the church made sure this was a point that. He said, we were not going to be leaving the church over this. And the son said, well, I don't expect you to. I feel like they made a point to make sure that was in there.
Yep.
And then the last story was somewhat of a young man who's not married.
Yeah.
Who wants to be active in the church. And so.
He's living celibate.
So what are your options? Those are shitty options.
Right.
If you look at the church, if you are trying to get guidance from the church.
And should we place bets on how many of those stories turn out in the end?
Seriously. Seriously.
Those couples stay married or that kid stays celibate? Yeah, right.
Well, that's why there
you can
used
only
to be
do
more.
that so long.
Right. Yeah. There used to be more, but they no longer have them on there.
Yeah, I swear there used to be 30 different stories on there.
Right. Well, they used to have a whole website about
mormonandgay.org. Yeah.
Yeah.
But, that's a victory for Satan to say Mormon or gay.
If you're going to identify as a gay member, please make sure you say Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and same-sex attracted.
Not Mormon and gay.
Oh my God. So ridiculous. Anyways.
So for my dad, all the talks, I think right now, they emphasize prayer, temple worship, church attendance, fasting, and repentance, right?
Yep.
They still talk about repentance as if you need to repent of this.
Uh-huh.
I don't even know what to say about that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But, I think for my dad, he, being a young person, I think he got married to my mom in their early 20s. No access to any kind of support group, only in a Mormon dominant community. Yeah. What was he supposed to do?
Right.
Be exiled? Because you can be exiled for leaving the church and not be part of the queer community. Yeah. So to be away from the church and a part of the queer community, in the 70s and 80s, you were going to have nobody. You would lose everything. And his salvation, totally at stake.
Oh, yeah.
If he didn't marry in the temple, that was all at stake. So... And I think he probably maybe felt the same way I did for a lot of years. I maybe didn't agree with a lot of things, but that nagging doubt of well, what if it's true?
Right.
What if it's true?
Yeah.
Then I've blown it.
Yeah, because the people who are able to step away from the church and live their authentic life, they first had to recognize that the church might be wrong, right? So if you believe that the church is right... that you can't do that. Like you very can't easily do that.
Right.
Is stepping away and living an authentic life.
Right.
You just go along with what the things are because they're like, this is the right path. This is what I'm supposed to do. So it's like something has to happen that makes you question the church and whether it's true first. Right. Don't you think?
Yeah.
In order to fully let yourself live your life.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, for me, when I kind of sat there and was thinking about this and I thought about the constant fear my dad was in. I think the constant fear, even for my mom, to raise this family up the way she was supposed to raise it, paying their tithing no matter what, and all these sacrifices, Yeah. And I really kind of started really thinking about that. And eventually what I came to understanding was, for me, the church, walking away from the church eventually became the easiest decision of my life. Because it was no longer about if the church was true or not. The church had devastated my family, and it doesn't give a shit.
Yeah. Oh, it definitely doesn't give a shit.
It doesn't give a shit that I sat there and I'm like, what if I could have lunch with one of them and tell our story, my family's story? What would they say? They'd probably give that smile and that nod and talk in the cadence that they talk in general conference and tell me that if I was to live my life and to be faithful, it will all work out when we die.
Yeah, which is totally invalidating and infuriating.
Right?
Because they can't possibly actually have empathy and compassion for what people are going through as a direct result of the teachings of the gospel.
If you really, truly cared about the people that you are basically responsible for, you would have a different attitude. Totally. You would not be calling people the names that they have called the queer community.
Yeah.
You would not put them in a position where they felt if they didn't get married to someone that they would lose everything. And for me, that's when I think it became less about if the church was true or not and more about if I died and this is all true, the Mormon God is true.
Yeah.
I feel like that God has more to answer for than I do.
Oh my gosh, yes. Yeah, that's so accurate.
I think I have lived as best as I can and the circumstances I've been under. And if a God cannot understand why I chose to walk away from the church after all of this, seeing the pain it has inflicted on my mom and my dad, if you cannot understand that, you have more to answer for.
Totally.
And he already does. Because how can you create these children and then hate them?
Yeah.
How can you,
for who they are? Yeah.
For what you've created them to be. How do you explain yourself for that?
Yeah.
How do you tell people basically it's almost impossible to come back to you? Because I could not do that as a parent.
No. That's not infinite love. That's not a parental love. No, it just doesn't even add up. It doesn't make sense. Oh, yeah.
And the leaders, they say they preach compassion. They say they preach love. They also say that they are a mouthpiece to God. So you're telling me that God is calling his people perverted, blasphemous, telling them that if they're gay, they're not manly. You're really...
Why is manly the goal anyways? Sorry, but that's stupid. That's just a stupid patriarchal bullshit thing to say anyways.
Yes.
Right?
Oh, yeah.
What is manly and why is it important to be that?
Right.
Sorry, as a man, I'm sorry. Our whole idea of masculinity is fucked up too. Anyways.
Well, and that's, and so for me, when I look at it and I say, you know what? I feel like I have less to answer for. I feel like I can hold my head up high in the end and say I did everything I could.
Yeah.
And when I realized that the amount of pain that this is causing everybody, I had to walk away because I had to break this cycle for my family.
Yep.
And I also realized too that I don't have to forgive the church for this.
No.
I don't have to, the church is very toxic about you have to forgive everybody. But I'm sorry, part of the forgiveness process is the person who did you wrong has to apologize.
Right. The church won't do that.
There has been no apology for people like my dad who have spent their entire life living in fear. There has been no apology to the kids who don't have real relations with their parents because they're hiding their sexual orientation. Mm-hmm. There have been no apologies to the families who have lost family members to suicide because their family member felt that it was better for them to be dead than to be part of the queer community.
Totally.
The church has not apologized for any of that.
Nope.
They make excuses.
Right.
Like the altitude is what
oh
affects,
my God, yes. Why this teen suicide rate is so high in Utah is because
of the altitude.
The altitude.
The church makes no apology for it. So
they will never own up. They will, because they can't admit fault. That's what it is.
Because if they admit fault, then they're wrong.
Right.
And they can't admit they're wrong.
Yeah.
So instead, they dig their heels in.
Yeah.
Even if they did one day apologize, I still don't have to forgive them.
No.
Nobody does.
No. Right. Forgiveness is never a requirement.
No. I think you can. People, I think, are always very. If you don't forgive, then it's just going to eat you alive.
Yeah.
And maybe it does for some people, and maybe forgiveness of the church for whatever reason, even if it's other trauma that the church has caused, maybe that is a part of your journey. And I think if that's a healthy way for you to move on, that's great.
That's fine.
But you don't have to.
It doesn't have to be everybody's experience.
And it won't. I don't feel like it eats me alive that I don't forgive the church.
Yeah.
For me, it's been more of a journey of compassion, like true compassion, and also understanding that I could never change the church from the inside. But the more that people can speak up about their stories, I think that is what's going to eventually create more change.
Yeah, and I think that's a big reason why I even do this podcast at all, is because I really felt like it was important to speak up, tell these stories, have people know the damage that's been done.
Yeah.
And even if only a few people listen to it, that's fine. I'm not, I think a lot of these podcasts and TikTok is a huge thing in the ex-Mormon world and stuff. And I think it can be incredibly cathartic and healing for us to share our stories, to validate each other, to feel like we're less alone, like other people understand us and we understand them. Like my ability to empathize and my compassion towards people has exponentially increased, right? Yeah. Because when I was in the church, it was always like, well, that's what you get. Or
do better.
Do better. Yeah, exactly. Or like, that's just what happens. That's the consequence. When you make a choice, you live with the consequence. Right. I mean, that was always my justification for it. Even though I always thought of myself as a compassionate or empathetic person, it did not compare to the empathy and compassion that I feel now that is way more genuine. Right. And real, of of real human suffering that I actually do genuinely care about, and not with any ulterior motive of oh, they need God in their lives. Right. We should help them or save them. Right. This savior complex. Right. This whole oh, it's so sad that they have such hard things, but they've made bad choices. So maybe I should show them a better way to live. Right. That's such bullshit.
No, and I think for me, it's been the same. I think being able to hear other people's stories, you realize, like you said, you're not alone. And I think that in the end, that's why coming on here was important, because I haven't heard, I'm sure there are stories, people out there being verbal about being a child of a parent that's come out.
I haven't heard them.
But I haven't either. But I don't listen to all the podcasts.
Yeah, neither do I.
Right? And I'm sure they're there, but they're not frequent.
Yeah.
And I wish, if nothing else, I just wish I could be you're not alone.
Yeah.
And there's no perfect way to deal with all of this. Whatever, if you're leaving the church, if you left the church, if you have questions about the church, everybody's path is different.
Yeah.
And everybody can have those ups and downs and different emotions, and it's not linear. It's all over the place. Yeah. But in the end, you're not alone.
Right.
There's people out there that are feeling the same thing as you. Even if you feel like you are the only person that has felt this way or gone through an experience, with a church that has, what do they boast, like 16 million people or whatever?
Yeah, supposedly.
Right? Supposedly. Like, there's people out there.
Oh, yeah. That have experienced the same things. Yeah. It's unbelievable, the pain and suffering. And I think the idea in the church is that we have to do it right. Right. Meaning, like, you know, you have to have a good enough reason to leave the church, or and also no reason is good enough, right?
Right.
In terms of that,
me just not like it.
Yeah, right. And like when I left the church, I remember even saying to my therapist, like, I have to do this right. I have to leave in the right way. Mm-hmm. But what that made me think of that is you saying, like, hey, you're gonna go through a whole spectrum of emotions, and all of it's okay.
Yeah.
And there's not one right or wrong way to grieve, or, you know, to process what you've been through, or to deconstruct the gospel and your whole life, learning that it's a giant lie and all this stuff, you know, like that messes with people in a lot of different ways. And I've seen a lot of different ways of people dealing with it. And I think it's really beautiful to be able to share your story. Mm-hmm. Your story is really compelling and really unique, but also not. Do you know what I mean?
There's like, so many people I know are probably out there, when I think about just the society at large, mm-hmm. plus the church on top of it. I know there are so many people out there, whether they know it or not, not everybody knows it, that they have a parent who is gay, bisexual, lesbian,
queer in some way.
Right. And maybe they know it, maybe they don't. Mm-hmm. But it's something that I think I hope more people can talk about, because it's a taboo topic, I think, for a lot of people. But, you know, that damage is there and it's real, and it's okay. Like, it's okay to be angry over it. It's okay to, I think some of my siblings have had an easier time with it than me, and that's okay.
And that's okay. Yeah. You
know, I think they've been able to, but they've had a different experience growing up. We all have a unique experience. So that's where it's however you experience leaving the church for whatever reason, it's not wrong, because we all have our own backgrounds and history and issues, and it's all okay. You know, for me, it was less about doctrinal issues. That's become more secondary for me. Yeah. As I've learned more about those. Yep. But for me, it was more about the emotion of it and the trauma of it and the hurt of it. For my husband, it was more about the doctrinal issues. Yeah. You know, I'm probably one of the few people who have left the Mormon church that has not read the CES letter. Yeah. I haven't read it, because in the end, it didn't really matter for me. Yeah. My husband, I think, has read it, but it didn't matter to me. Yeah. For me, it was very validating to read it, because I had already decided I was out by the time I read it. But yeah, I mean, in some ways, it's not important for everyone to read it. That's not what everybody's journey is going to be. But I think it's beautiful. I have really loved having this conversation with you and having you on. We could probably talk for 2 more hours. We've been talking for almost 2 hours, and we had, I think we said that we already had a 2-hour lunch before this. So I always it's just this running joke with my husband that, you know, I'll say to him, oh yeah, she talks a lot, because it's really me that talks a lot. He knows, like, oh yeah, everyone you're with talks a lot. Mm-hmm. Sure they do, because I'm the one that talks a lot most of the time. 4 hours later.
But 4 hours later, and I'll just be like, oh, honey, it was her fault. She talks a lot.
Well, like you said, you can talk about church issues till the end of time.
Yeah. It's just because they're never ending.
Yeah.
They're never ending. Yeah. And it's so fascinating. To me, I love it. Yeah. I love this, and I love your story, and I love that we got to know each other.
I know, it's been so fun.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that you came and visited, and she came to my house from out of state, but you were already here anyways.
I was already here visiting the motherland.
Yes, the motherland of Utah. So much fun. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And I guess we'll just close this out now, and we'll see you next time.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.